Go. Welcome to the PRCA Fuse podcast, the podcast for those in and around PR doing amazing things. And today we're joined by Debbie Zaman, who is working to increase representation of women experts in the media through a media training program that has seen over 1,000 women participate. Hi, thank you for joining us, Debbie. First of all, can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Debbie Zaman. I'm the CEO of With. We're a B2B technology and professional services strategic communications business. Media relations, messaging, positioning, corporate reputation, content and digital marketing is what we do. I'm also an angel investor in female-founded businesses and passionate about women leadership. And that has been part of our reason as an agency for starting to run free media training for women leaders over the last couple of years. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today.
Cool. So what is it that inspired you to set up this program? What's the program called, first of all? Sorry.
With women.
With women. And what inspired you to set this up?
So a couple of years ago, I went along to an event hosted by Women in Journalism, massive transatlantic organisation who'd done a huge study into representation behind the camera, kind of in the newsroom, and in published news media. And they found that only 30% of quoted media experts were women. And it was a really robust study and a pretty shocking figure. And there were quite a few voices discussing how shocking the figure was, but I didn't really see anything happening in terms of endeavours to make an active change to that figure. So myself and some of my senior management team got our heads together and had a think about what we could do to make a change. And we launched free media training for women leaders.
Cool. And why do you think there is that gap? What is it? Because there's no shortage of qualified women, is there?
I mean, absolutely, and that's what we evangelize in every single session that we host. That every person, every woman that comes to a session that we host has the credibility and has the experience to be a quoted media expert. I think there's a lot of reasons. It's not just one thing that we can kind of change. I think there is obviously still the reality that more companies have CEOs who are men than they do women. And so often, I'm sure you see this as well, media training and media interviews are kept at that CEO level. And I totally understand why. But the reality is, unless we kind of do something to change that, we're not going to impact the number of women in the media, quoted in the media. I think the other thing that we see through the training that we've done, and without wanting to gender generalize about this, is that a lot of women seem more ready to hand over the opportunity, but because they don't think they are expert enough. They don't believe that their expertise is at a high enough level to offer it to media, which is something that we're unpicking one media training session at a time, right? Because it's obviously not true.
Yeah, clearly. And what do you think's behind them, that belief? Is it different in every case, or is there a common theme that you're finding when you're speaking to people who come through this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a vicious circle, right? Because women can't be what they can't see, or they're less likely to be if they can't see it. And so, with a dearth of women being quoted as experts in media, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that women are less likely to think that they are the caliber of expert that media require. So that access to training that really democratizes that expertise helps. There's a real light bulb moment on a slide where we talk about your depth of expertise in the job that you do every single day, that you have years or even decades of experience in, versus a journalist, even a specialist journalist's breadth of experience. And there's that idea that you can't be caught out by a question you can't answer. You might not want to answer it, which is a different matter, but you can't be caught out because you actually are sitting on so much expertise already is a real light bulb, because there is that fear, I think, for participants of any gender around doing media interviews that they might be caught out. So that's a really helpful thing. But I think the only way that we can really change that belief in women that they do have valuable expertise is by seeing more women quoted as experts in the media.
And that's something, obviously, so you're trying to address this from a PR point of view, or a comms point of view. The media is also trying to address this as well. You were telling me before about an initiative that the BBC has in trying to address this. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the BBC has had their 50-50 programme in place for a long time,
Mhm.
and do a pretty good job of ensuring balance. But we know from comments on social media by producers of other kind of mainstream TV news channels that they are really struggling to find women to endeavour to reach those kind of 50-50 ratios. There was a shout out from Sky on International Women's Day this year as a plea to businesses not just to put their women forward on International Women's Day. And we were like, we're here for it. So there is a need really to look at businesses and their speaker benches, right? So one thing businesses can do, if they have a guy CEO, absolutely, it is perfectly reasonable that he would be a spokesperson. But looking a little bit further afield into the senior leadership team, into other experts within the business who could talk quite specifically on other areas of the business, and looking to make sure that that speaker bench can be as diverse and representative as possible.
And with the media outlets themselves, so are they happy to speak to people who are not at CEO, who are C-suite and other functions as well? Are you finding that they're more than happy to take them as spokespeople?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we've had people who are chief product officers who talk to the engineering, to the product side of things. We have, one of the things I'm particularly passionate about is CMOs and senior marketers make absolutely amazing spokespeople. They're so close to the brand values of the company, to the agreed messaging. And we absolutely find a much richer theme of women there as well, typically. So there are, as long as there is a rationale for why you're putting that person forward as an expert in their field and not solely based on their gender, absolutely, we haven't had any pushback.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And am I right in thinking you've trained over 1,000 women now in the last 2 years?
Yeah, it has gone a bit crazy. So we started small and then realised that we weren't going to turn the dial very quickly. So kudos to my wider team who've put such an effort into this. We have made partnerships with women's communities from cyber to crypto, from AI to financial services, brought them in for the media training sessions, and our online sessions have gone up to 90, 100 people coming to each one. Our in-person sessions in London, we're getting 30 to 40 people along to each one. So my colleague said the other day, we're going to have to get a bigger boat. We've been very lucky to have partners give us rooms for free as the training's grown and grown. And yeah, we have, I was at Web Summit doing a session on the stage there. I was absolutely terrified. Nobody was going to turn up, and the room was absolutely rammed, which again just really shows the need for it and the appetite for it. So, yeah, really, obviously, thrilled to bits that we've got so many people leaning into it, because the more people we can train, the more people we can have, leaning into these opportunities with media, and the better representation we can see.
So it's in person, sometimes remote as well, and sometimes it's at conferences. So talk to us about what's actually involved in the training. Is it different if you're doing it in person versus doing it remotely, and what other topics you're covering? How does it work?
Yeah. So we do a session every single month. We alternate online and in person. That's meant as we've grown, we've been able to bring in women from the US, across continental Europe. And it's a 2 hour session, which involves two of our senior team, oftentimes me, talking really quickly to get through as much content as we can in 2 hours. You know, Adrian, that's actually, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively short session for media training.
Yeah.
But effectively, what we do is we give all of the tips and hints and skills that we would give in a client session. But we don't have space for the practice. So, you know, if you're taking an executive team through media training, the hints and tips and skills are a part of it. You then get them to put it into practice and you can give them live feedback and stress test it. That's the bit we don't have the space to do, because we'll have women from all sorts of different professional backgrounds in the room. We do some exercises where we have the time, but it's largely focused on those skills. And it's been really interesting because we've worked really hard to try and find ways to make that content as sticky as possible, as memorable as possible, because we're kind of firing it at people over the course of 2 hours. So we've tried lots of different ways to make sure that it comes in kind of bite-sized chunks. So there's mnemonics, there's analogies, there's things like that which help make it stick. And I bumped into somebody that we trained right at the beginning, a couple of years ago, the other day, and we have this one slide where we describe it as a game of rugby, not a game of tennis. So, you know, that idea that you're not just batting this question answer backwards and forwards with a journalist, or, you know, running around the pitch as they use their skills to kind of lob and volley at you, but instead you're catching the ball, pivoting and taking it towards your own try line. Luckily, thanks to Ilona Meyer, the rugby analogy even works with the Americans now. But this lady I bumped into was like, I remember, it's a game of rugby, not a game of tennis. So whilst we go through it at a fair rattle, thankfully we can see that it's content that's really sticking. And as I say, there's real light bulb moments for people during the session that help just break it down and make it less scary. And at the end of the day, we're covering content, confidence, clarity, and control. And that's pretty much everything that we would be teaching a client as well.
So confidence, clarity,
Content and control.
and so you've talked about two light bulb moments there. One which is the kind of that you know more than the journalist kind of thing, and the other one
Yeah.
which is like the rugby rather than
Yeah.
tennis. Of those four areas, those four C's, is there one particular C that people react to most? Is there, you know, is there a light bulb moment, or is there like other light bulb moments in all four of those, depending on who they are?
I think there really are. They're just because there's truisms in there, right, that we hold a mirror up to. So, you know, that feeling that often people have of being quite scared going into a media interview, and we unpick why that is. And so when we say, look, don't try and remember 6 pages of notes, remember 3 points. That lands really well, because you can see people who have probably been asked to try and remember 6 pages of notes before. And we're saying, like, it's not possible. It's not a human request to ask you to do that. And the only thing that's true is in that moment, you'll be trying to remember 6 pages of notes and making yourself really unconfident in that moment. You don't feel like you've got your 2 feet on solid ground. So, I think the idea of bridging or pivoting always lands really well, because we do that towards the end. And there's always a kind of, yeah, but what if they ask you something you don't want to answer? And so giving them that kind of skill, that technique, is really helpful. But I think the other thing is we have some brilliant videos in it of good practice and bad practice, and being able to see pivoting done well, being able to see knowing and owning your content really well kind of played out, is really, really helpful. So hopefully it's a bit of a series of light bulb moments from start to finish.
And tell me a little bit about the impact it's having. Like, can you share any stories about people who have been on this and gone on to do amazing things?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the session that I just did at Web Summit, there was a moment where a woman came up to me and said, I've been sitting in content, the 13 stages of content at Web Summit, been sitting in content all day, sort of wondering why I'm here. And I've come to this session and now I'm so grateful I'm here. And that kind of individual impact is what we're doing it for, to start the media training journey of, as many people as possible. But to give you another couple of cases in point, we trained a FinTech CFO, and her job previously had been, talking to stakeholders on very complex pieces of regulation and, things very much befitting her role. And after the media training session, and hopefully that series of light bulbs, she was able to capitalize on an opportunity with the BBC ahead of the election last year. They had a bunch of financial services commentators on a rooftop overlooking the city to say what impact the election outcome might have. And so that took it. She had the confidence to take her narrative from something very technical to something really accessible that could engage the BBC audience. And then we had a founder as well, founder of a divorce tech platform, who was at a very early stage. A lot of her messaging had been crafted very specifically with investors in mind, which we often see. It needs a little bit of refinement for a more accessible media audience. And she worked on that, and very soon after the training was able to lean into an opportunity with the Times, where they'd looked at a number of submissions, and she was able to craft her content with clarity and get that cut through and make the final cut. So yeah, we are seeing people really get that exposure as quoted media experts, which is where and why we started out, right?
That is absolutely brilliant. And do you stay in touch with these people? I guess, they're coming back to you and saying, Debbie, guess what? I've just been on the BBC.
Do you know what? I put a post on LinkedIn the other day about the Web Summit session.
Mm-hmm.
And I had so much of the community that we've trained leaving comments and, support. It was lovely. But we also, we have a WhatsApp group, which is intentionally the least chatty WhatsApp group, because the goal is not something that you have to put onto mute immediately after you join it. But a couple of times a month, my team will post clips that they've seen or heard or read that show really good skills, or sometimes really bad skills, let's be fair, because that's as helpful sometimes as the good skills. And they'll pop that clip onto the WhatsApp channel, explain what's been done really well. And it's about us keeping that muscle memory going, because it's not, as you know, media training is not a one and done. You don't get these skills and suddenly, that's it. I often liken it to being given a pair of skis for the first time and being expected to do a black run. You don't have your first couple of hours of media training and then, tomorrow you're going to hop on Sky. So, it is about that WhatsApp group is there to kind of keep that muscle memory going, so that in the time between having our session and whatever else other sessions they might have access to, they're able to keep that kind of practice alive.
Brilliant. I love that. And forgive me for asking this question, because I do think it's an amazing thing that
Yeah,
you
no.
but how would you respond? How would you respond to someone who might say, for example, that 2 hours just isn't really long enough to do, to really train someone for this, and actually you need to go a lot deeper, spend more time with someone before they're ready for a media interview?
Yeah,
And
I would 100% agree. Like, we, as I said, we are very much starting people's media training journeys, but we leave the door open for them to come back to future sessions. We've had people do that, where they've come to one session, 6 months later, they've joined an online session, to kind of, there's so much content, they almost get something new out of it every time. And absolutely, it doesn't replace that deeper session where you're going to spend half a day with a group of people from the same organization, where you're able to really test their messaging, put them through their paces, refine it live there, show how that kind of, that story specifically could get written up or broadcast. It is absolutely, it's something, but we very much recognize it's not everything, but it's also an awful lot better than nothing.
totally. So, what more would be needed, would you say, in addition to what you're offering, to build that long-term confidence and hopefully visibility as well?
Such a good question, and it's one we're sort of asking ourselves at the moment as well. We have scheduled a hackathon across our company in a couple of weeks' time to get perspectives from all of our team on what does this look like for 2026. Nearly forgot what year it is next year. How can we take this further? What more can we do? But I also think outside of our organisation and the With Women programme, looking at male allyship, if the landscape into which this is landing is still one of majority male CEOs, how can we bring them into this change? I definitely think that companies embracing the curation of a broader, more representative speaker panel are companies that will be on the right side of history, look great from a brand perception point of view, and we're really keen to start unlocking that, so that it's incremental, it's exponential, right? We can do more, but if we have allies that are helping us achieve that, then it's going to be even bigger and better.
Great. And for the listeners of this podcast, so there are people who are working in PR and comms in-house, and there are people who are working PR and comms in agencies. What other practical actions can they take to help improve the representation of women experts in the media?
PR agencies and in-house comms team know the businesses that they represent so well. They know a lot of the stakeholders. They will know the people in those organizations that have the likability and credibility in equal measure that is required to be a great spokesperson. And I think if they're women, send them along to our free media training. But sorry, jokes apart. I think looking at how, whether you're agency or in-house, you can play a role in encouraging that broadening of the speaker bench. There's so much data out there to show the positive impact that can have. I think, arming yourself with the outcomes that the company that does that leans into that opportunity can generate is the key thing, and being part of that change.
Lovely. 1,000 women.
Mm-hmm.
What's next? What's next? Another 1,000? Do you want to grow it? Do you want to evolve it? Do you want to find
Absolutely,
partners?
another 1,000, another 10,000, because it is really, having as many women as possible with building their skills all the time to really get in a position where they feel capable to do media interviews is absolutely the goal. So sort of never enough in terms of the numbers, but we're also looking at things like how we can build the idea of equal gender visibility into our business. What might we do to offer women-led businesses a greater kind of foothold into media visibility outside of the media training? So I don't know what that looks like yet. Watch this space a little bit, but bigger and better, and even more women gaining visibility.
Amazing. So, if one of our listeners knows someone who could be a good fit for the program, where can they send someone to find out more information about what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. We're just starting to put together our plans for next year. We've got dates in already for January and February, one online session and one in person in London session. And we'll be releasing more very soon. And all of that can be received if people email with women, or one word, with women, at welcometowith.com. So with women at welcometowith.com, and the team will send back the dates.
Perfect. And is there any kind of are there any qualifications they should have? Should they be of a certain seniority? What qualifies for the program?
Yeah, really good question. We do want to reach as many people as possible, so we try not to put too many limitations on it. But it works best for senior women who are going to get the opportunity to put that into practice quite soon. Because if somebody's at a very formative stage of their career, it could be quite a long time until they get the opportunity to use this. So we do tend to lean towards it being most helpful for senior executive women, but we're always open to women applying.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Debbie.
Thanks, Adrian.
Yes.